So we demystify emerging tech with all sorts of brilliant folks, and we're super glad to have Raja, and Michael, Rajeev, and Stephen on the board today. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning and how it has global implications for the life sciences. So thank you all for being here. Stephen, please kick us off. We're going to have a wonderful time, and go ahead. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Stephen Kuhn. I am the founder and managing partner of Adventary Capital Partners and Adventary Services Group. We're a 7-year-old firm, 2017. We are a stage agnostic and sector agnostic investor. We also have our second division, Adventary Services Group, providing, we have 8 practices. I won't run through them all now, but everything from AI to IP, led by our partner over there, Shmuel Silverman. We've got recruiting, CFO advisory, growth practice, so on. So we, getting clue here. So, we're on the green side. You can see we're early stage venture capital, also private equity, and then our services over here. And we're about to announce, this is not formal, nobody's listening, right? Our conscious leadership practice as well. So super excited about that, and our new partner, Melissa Griffiths, who's just joined. So really looking forward to leaning into that. We are delighted to have 3 of our portfolio companies here today. We've got Plethy over there, sorry, wrong side, with Raja. And we have Michael Johnson from ASD.me, and you're going to learn all about these companies and the amazing stuff they do. And of course, we've got Luminas here, and Rajeev is going to talk about them. We are interested in meeting all of you. We love to meet young entrepreneurs who are looking for capital and who need a little help from time to time operating their company. So with that, back to you.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, let's light this candle. What do you say? So Rajeev, maybe tell us a little bit about why you do what you do and how you got started.
Well, why do machine learning? That's a very good question. I've always been interested. I've always been interested in how the brain works, and obviously with all the innovation that's happening with neural networks and so on, I have it's something kind of like a dream come true to live today. The particular, so we'll talk about like a little bit about what my company does, but the what we find really interesting are things involving generative AI, which is the work that's going. A lot of it, everyone's heard about generative AI and ChatGPT, but there's a kind of a domain-specific area which is really exciting, which is really focused on specific elements. So, for example, generating AI models that can predict chemical structures, and can predict interactions between people and so on. So it's a very, very powerful area. I've always been fascinated by it. I used to write video games when I was young, and I had my first AI. That was the first time I played with AI. So, and created a video game that nobody could win. So that's the most boring game on earth.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael, please.
Great. Michael Johnson, CEO, chairman of a company called Healthcare, which is a data-centric research company focused on the very early detection of infant non-neurotypical conditions. And how I got into the business, I was a consultant, a management consultant. I come from the investment banking world, and was intrigued when I met a neuroscientist in my consulting space who had just completed a clinical study on 200 patients in partnership with Boston Children's Hospital. And they were actually using EEG data they'd basically taken EEG encephalograph recordings of kids and using a nonlinear algorithm in AI, and they were able to calculate a biomarker for a risk trajectory if this child was going to be autistic with a 95% efficacy. And that got me leaning in. And I'm like, why is this technology, this amazing technology, not getting to the bedside? And the answer was, a low-cost, high-volume EEG headset for a baby does not exist. I was like, well. It does now. It does now. That's why I'm in the space. So we're actually kicking off a 3,000 patient clinical study in partnership with the state of New York to define and confirm the efficacy of using multimodal biodata inputs, including EEG, auditory brainstem response, which is the test you have for hearing, and it's through the combination of these time-synced multimodal assessments is how we're going to be able to define and increase the efficacy of determining a biomarker if a child is going to be at risk for autism.
Excellent. Thank you.
I don't have profound stories like that. I'm an idiot savant, so I read. One of the things that I read was a World Health Organization article on musculoskeletal care. I thought about my parents, and I thought to myself, well, they're growing older, living longer. How can we enable them to manage their care at home? So that's what we do for every joint in the body with health systems. Somewhere along the way, we got an opportunity to help the bluest of the blue-collar workers without sounding elitist. So we deal with mining, natural gas, oil, and retail, transportation. So help injured workers recover at home as well. So that's really our story. No background in healthcare. Thought it was a societal problem to go solve, and here I am.
Excellent. So I think it's always important to set the table and define some of these terms to lay a good foundation. So Rajeev, when you hear artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative AI, can you give us kind of a quick overview on what these things mean for you?
Well, I think AI is the overarching domain, like the overarching area. There are many different types of AI algorithms out there. So things that are not necessarily machine learning based, like expert systems and so on, could be classified as AI. And then machine learning within that is, again, there are many ways of doing it. There are, of course, neural networks. It's what everyone knows about today. But prior to neural networks, there were things like Bayesian networks. There are you could even argue that some of the regression techniques out there are machine learning to some extent. But then, of course, now we have deep learning, and which are neural network based. And this is where generative algorithms come in, which are just massive, like billions of parameters neural networks. And they are unimaginably large. So it's essentially, you can kind of think about it as concentric circles, with the smallest part being is generative, and then neural networks or machine learning is the next biggest set, and then AI is the overarching area beyond that.
And only recently has the biological approach and the computational approach converged, right? So would you say in the last 5-10 years, or?
Yeah, I think the neural network idea was, it was Geoffrey Hinton in the 1980s, was the guy who kind of pioneered that. And Kuhn in the late 90s pioneered what are known as convolutional neural networks, which kind of roughly models the way cats see the world, which I have no idea how cats see the world, but in theory, that's...
But it's accurate.
It's accurate, exactly. It's probably like they think about what are we going to do next. So then that was convolutional neural networks, but it didn't achieve the kind of scales that we have today. Yeah. And yes, the computational power is there, but still incredibly expensive. So for me, it's like when I see something like ChatGPT, and I know that every time you prompt it, there's this massive set of computations behind it. It's like, how do they make money? It's just massive. But on the other hand, you've got companies like NVIDIA that are constantly innovating, and we're seeing like just mind-blowing advances there. So
yeah, well, with these cat models.
By the way, quantum computing. That's going to be the part that where I think that we're really going to start to see neural networks really take off, because it's massive parallelization.
Right. And with these cat models, there's probably mountains of data. I know. All right, we'll keep it moving. So, Michael, tell us a little bit more about.
There's a special place in hell reserved
from a business model perspective. Like, obviously, there's a lot of positive good, but from a business perspective, you got to make money too. So how do you kind of balance these two things?
Oh, wow. Great question. So first and foremost, autism is growing at an astronomical rate. As of 2023, the average occurrence of autism was 1 in 34. So there's such a demand for getting a behavioral health evaluation. And the problem is you can't get one. The lead time to get an in-person autism diagnosis in big markets like California and New York is 8, 12, 14 months. If you're in a rural market, it can be as much as 2 years. So we basically started ASD.me, the world's first AI-centric telehealth platform to help address some of those issues in the space. Issue number one, the average cost for a diagnostic, an autism full evaluation, averages between $3,500 and $6,000. There's multiple appointments, there's multiple occurrences. These assessments are being done by developmental pediatricians and state licensed PhD psychologists. Those are the only ones who are really qualified to do these assessments, and the only ones that the schools will accept if your child needs to be in special education classes or if they need to have ABA therapy. They can't enroll in these courses or get in special ed without a certified outcome report from a clinician. Because we've eliminated the brick and mortar, we're 100% virtual. And the CapEx expenses associated with brick and mortar, we're able to pay our clinicians 26% higher salaries. Wow. They work a 4-day work week, they see 2 patients a day, and they take care of no administration. Wow. In return, we can offer a lower price point to our clients. And guess who else appreciates this? Insurance companies. Their cost of care is going down and they're paying attention. So the business model is really robust in that we're evaluating tools, AI, machine learning, and in-home camera monitors to actually assess the child's behavioral health in the comfort of their own home. That's going to be more convenient for the parent who doesn't have to take off of school and work things out at work or, things of that nature. And it's going to be better for the child because, 2 minutes on a story. One of our board advisors, PhD neuroscientist out of Rutgers University, great lady, she was able to use a mobile phone camera and take 3-minute videos, 24 consecutive weeks of a child, and that's a patented biomarker for diagnosing if that child's going to be on the autism spectrum. So we took it a step further. We said, if you can do that with a mobile phone camera, what could you do with LiDAR, the technology they use for a driverless car? So we filed a patent for that. We've got a thing we call the data collection table, which is a bed, and you lay the child on the data collection table. It's got 8 sensors and sections. So now we're tracking their movement as they're laying in the bed. The LiDAR cameras above them, and now we're having 3D imaging of them. We can put VR headset glasses on them, and now we're eye tracking. All of these are biodata inputs that are time synced and being delivered to our cloud, our platform, where our computational tools are, where we run AI regressions and models and actually calculate risk trajectories for these kids. So in the end, we're saving the parents money, we're saving the payers money, and we're making this more accessible so parents can get the information they need to get access to care for their children.
Yeah. Michael, one other point that is so important that I want to make sure you highlight, and that is that early detection has a huge effect on the outcome for that child for the rest of their life. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, very, very true. So the hardest thing I have to do, because when we were first starting the company, we were having trouble with no-shows and parents not showing up. So I personally took it on to be the first point of contact with every parent who signed up. By the way, in 1 month, in October, on a $200 a day media spend, over 320 parents from the state of California alone came to the ASD.me website for an appointment. So there's a tremendous demand for the service. And the hardest thing it was for me is to tell a parent whose child is 9, they're basically too old for us. Because according to the CDC, if you can begin treatment as soon as possible, the lifelong outcome for that child is exponentially greater. So what we're actually doing in terms of the EEG headset, that's a clinical trial that we want to get. The science is there. It's just that the hardware wasn't there. And because I come from a tech manufacturing background, I was like, we can make a EEG headset for a baby. So we did, but what's going to happen? Now we're combining multiple tests within this single medical device apparatus. And we're going to start testing kids as early as the first 3 months of life. And what's going to happen? We're going to start tracking that brain because we're combining the EEG test with auditory brainstem response test, a test that you have to take in 23 states by law before the parent is allowed to check the child out of the hospital. So we're going to combine those two tests, reduce the costs because it's combined with a single medical device apparatus. And now we're going to start testing kids at birth, 3 months. We want to be adopted into the well baby visit schedule. So we're testing at birth, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, and 2 year. What we're doing is we're actually tracking the changes in the human brain over the course of that time and drawing correlations to those changes to neurotypical differences. The sooner we can detect and start getting that child care, we hope to start an entirely new category. It's called infant cognitive behavioral therapeutics. We're going to test these kids before they start communicating. Autism is a communicative condition. And if we can find out that a kid's at risk and start treating them at the first 3 months of life, their lifelong outcome hopefully is going to be a lot better.
Yeah, that's huge. Thank you for your work, Michael. You know, it's interesting. They said that innovation, these big leaps happen when there are two separate spaces that converge. And it sounds to me like your background in the hardware space allowed you to have this insight. Raja, similarly, your background sounds like wasn't initially in medicine. Did those two disparate spaces converging play any role in you having any kind of unlocks?
Yeah, as an Asian, my mom was very disappointed I was not a doctor. Thank God I'm not. So my background, for those of you who look me up, it's Cisco Systems, Hyperloop One, Boston Consulting. Nothing to do with nothing or what I'm doing. The advantage, however, is this. I've done digitization in multiple industries, including fan experience at the Giant Stadium here. So when you start looking at business processes and how you automate it, whether it's for Goldman Sachs or BofA, how teller experience is done, or fan experience at the Yankee Stadium or the Giant Stadium or whatever else, you really start looking at what are the small micro steps you need to take to get the human being to do what they're supposed to do. When you start looking at it in the context of what we do, the biggest problem is getting a human being to come home between clinic visits and follow what the doctor asks them to do or what the PT asks them to do. It sounds pretty simple, but if you've ever gone through a procedure, you recognize they give you 6 sheets of paper and they tell you, go have at it, come find me 6 weeks from now. So once you come home and you start looking into that 6 sheets of paper, you're like, I have no idea what the heck I'm supposed to do. So that's really what we started focusing on. Now, it's not just the digitization. The other thing that we brought into place was I got an opportunity for several years to go run new business units. And part of what I was tasked with was to tear down a business unit and rebuild it. So as a result, I had brought in postdoctorates in behavioral psychology on staff, because if you work for a large corporation, you understand how many SVPs does it take to screw in a light bulb, right? And so how do you convince them to go do something new? So you know where. Yeah, Peter would tell you this. So what happens then is, so I thought to myself, if you've driven change management philosophies in corporate life and got SVPs to go change a light bulb, the same behavior has to work for patients as well. So if you meet them where they are, then it'll work. They'll do what the heck you're asking them to do. And so it's a combination of digitization and some learnings on corporate change management.
And what about gamification? Were you able to implement any of these when you're trying to change behavior?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing. Particularly if you're in the Bay Area, everything is gamified, right? You're like, oh my God, Candy Crush it. So the problem that you have with that is this. What we found is when you have a population that's 16 years old, older than the requirements for you, to 94 years old. So for some of you, it's your parents or your grandparents, right? The behavior is different. The behavior is also different when you start looking at what their ethnicity is. And then it's also different when you start looking at what their occupation is. So when you just look at data of like, okay, 50 to 60-year-old, 50 to 60-year-old who's brown and something is different than, right? And so, believe it or not, most Medicare age population in the United States who is Caucasian loves playing Candy Crush, but hates when healthcare is gamified. What? Right? And so you start learning as you're running these cohorts what these behaviors are. So the answer to your question is the TikTok generation, certainly. Medicare age, oh, heck no.
So it's got to be personalized. Yeah. So Michael, I got a question for you. Actually, it's two questions. One is, does autism exist outside of humans, like in the animal species? And also, well, let's start with that one, actually.
I have no idea.
And I guess, like, secondly, like, what do you think is causing to this increase in rise in autism?
Well, we talked about that a few moments ago. I think it's two paths. Number one, there is a link, a correlation between toxins and the rise in autism. Number two, very much like COVID, because we've increased the sophistication of technology in being able to determine if a child is on the risk trajectory for being autistic, the occurrence of a positive diagnosis has increased exponentially.
The biometrics are better, so it's going to reveal more.
That is correct. Okay. In my opinion, we're all kind of, autistic. Seriously, I know I need a little help every now and then. But it's a very good question. And again, being able to reduce the friction in the autistic space, the autistic diagnostic space. And one thing, since you brought the question up, how are we going to use AI and machine learning to really innovate this space? So we have telehealth, 100% telehealth evaluations performed by licensed PhD psychologists. And that's great because we took all of last year, all of 2023, and put together a custom process, an ASD.me custom process using our protocols and processes as outlined by the American Academy of Pediatrics to define how to diagnose autism using telehealth as a tool, only autism. And at the end of the day, what we are finding is we're capturing these images on a screen. So behind the screen, we've got time-synced audio files, video files, and biosensor movement, sensorimotor movement that we're capturing. So it really comes down to the time between the clinician giving a command and the child responding. Their eye gaze, the position of their hands, their posture, the gait when they're walking. All of these are biodata inputs that we are now using AI and machine learning to calculate and further define if this child is on the spectrum. It's not an elimination of the therapist yet. Gotcha. And the intent is not to eliminate that space. The intent is to increase access to care by leveraging technology.
Got it. And speaking of which, Rajeev, let's talk a little bit about the competitive space. How are you able to differentiate, and then how does that show up in your storytelling as a brand?
Right. So I think, one of the things that we do as a company, so this is Luminas Health, we're essentially using a highly trained, domain-specific generative model. So it's a large language model that's essentially based on a massive corpus of data that we've collected. When we differentiate what we do compared to the others, there are two elements. One of the things is you identify the core elements that make you what you are, which is you have to think through. Okay, well, what are the key things that make you distinct as a company, and what is it that you have to offer that is specific to the markets that you're targeting. So in our case, what we have is we have a massive corpus of essentially patient records, and we're able to do that. We're able to construct a very unique large language model that is highly specific, very targeted at a narrow domain. But in the process of doing that, we are also constructing a large language model that is capable of understanding the way doctors speak, which is it's a highly specialized art. I certainly don't understand it, but we have a model that does, and it's able to transform and understand how doctors are able to speak and communicate and get things across. And so that becomes something that's really unique in the marketplace, even though it starts off at targeting at a very specific area, which is, in our case, is medical coding. The process of doing that gives us some very unique tools. And this is part of when you start to think about, well, what differentiates you, what makes you what you are as a company, that kind of gets you the market edge. Like a lot of times, I don't actually think about our competitors so much. The reason for that is that every competitor is going to find an edge. And so the way to kind of do it is, there's this thing about, if you're running, don't look over your shoulder. It's just run as fast as you can and focus on what you're good at. And I kind of take that approach, which is that we have a highly specialized technology. We have a market where we already know who our first customers are going to be. We know how to sell to them. We know how to grow them. And one of the interesting things, when I was I used to work for Hewlett Packard, and one of the interesting things came around innovation. So if I ask you, so what is the most powerful form of innovation in any company? The first thing people think about is technology. Like if you think about patents and technology, it turns out that branding and marketing are the most innovative parts of any company. And that is, it's always been the case. I mean,
How are you measuring that when you say most impactful?
So most impactful would be the thing that actually drives the creativity and sale of your product. So how do you reach the largest audience? Sony and Betamax. So Sony's Betamax versus VHS. Way back in the day, VHS won out. It was an inferior technology, but came across because of better marketing. I won't tell you exactly what that marketing was, but it was better marketing, and that's what won the day. And the most innovative type of marketing will win. And it's and sometimes that's as simple as the fact that you know specifically the markets you're targeting and the specific types of like highly targeted market. Other times that you know that if I'm going to broadcast it to the largest number of people, about whether you're going to do viral marketing, all of these things are innovations that have really pushed forward how we sell things.
So speaking of innovations in branding, Stephen, do you want to?
The old joke about branding and HP, right?
Yeah.
If HP marketed sushi, they'd call it cold dead fish.
Yes. They were not particularly innovative. Yes.
So Stephen, speaking of innovations in branding, can you speak a little bit to Adventary and how you're approaching this?
Well, I alluded to that a little while ago. Thanks for the question. And there are a lot of investors out there, and we are focused on people. We're focused on technology. We like innovation, whatever it happens to be. There's not much differentiation between the hundreds or thousands of venture firms out there. We truly believe, not just as a marketing tool, in this conscious leadership, heart-based leadership that we're bringing forward as a brand. Are any of you aware of any venture firms or private equity firms that talk about heart-based leadership or conscious leadership actively, or even much less put it out forward as their primary brand differentiator? Anybody?
What is it?
Can you define it for us?
Yeah, heart-based leadership, conscious leadership is focusing on empathy as your core value, to connect with other people, to become better humans. And by being better humans, we become better leaders. We become better entrepreneurs. And it is about empathy and compassion. And those are not words that are traditionally associated with venture capitalists. Right? So we, again, this is a little market research we're doing right here. We're super excited about this. Yes, I think it's going to be very impactful from a marketing perspective, but that's not why we are doing it. We are doing it because it is the right thing to do. It is about being with people. It is about empathizing with people in our portfolio. It's, we're along the ride for them. This is their journey, and they're the heroes of their journey, and we want to support that.
Wow, that's awesome. Is there a particular book or individual that inspired you on this path, Stephen?
Well, that's a long story, which I won't bore you all with today, but maybe at another time I'll bore you with it. But over the last 15 to 20 years, I've been on a personal development growth path, and it has fundamentally changed my view of myself first and foremost, but the business world around me and the people I want to collaborate with and the people I want to support in that journey.
Beautiful. I know Ruby is really tuned into that as well, Ruby A. Great. So do you want to maybe ask another questions to one of the folks up here, Steve?
No, you do a fantastic job. I can't gainsay you.
Super. Well, thanks for the kind words. What are the kinds of things that that you guys don't get asked about, like that you really feel need attention? Rajeev, let's start with you here.
I think one of the things that I think one of the things that oftentimes we don't get asked about is the process of building a company. It is an incredibly painful thing, and very often it requires a lot of help. I mean, it's not something that it really requires a village, and unfortunately, I feel like the village idiot a lot of times, but it really does require a lot of people. And the thing is, building that network and building those connections is essential. And with and networking, while people always talk about it, it's an intelligent networking. Basically, understanding who to talk to, why to talk to them, and also understanding the nature of how that relationship will evolve. And oftentimes it sounds funny, but oftentimes it's basically chemistry. But building that foundation, building that village is so important when building up any company. So I think that if you ask me like what people should know about what kind of questions people should be asking, or that people don't ask enough of, it's really, how do you build up a company? Like, how do you actually build it up? How do you weather the storms? How do you get through things? And in the end, what I come back to is build a community around it. And it's
a very thoughtful response. I appreciate that. I think also like shared interests can be really helpful too, and shared values. I know Buzzable is, who got a lot of folks here tonight, is doing a great job in providing local shows so you can connect into. Raja, sure, please do.
Yeah, first it takes a lot of vodka. If it has rooibos on it, there's a place in heaven for people like this. Yeah, says the South African. Doc.
That's another of our portfolio.
Brilliant. Yeah.
For those of you who might have tried it.
Look, it takes a cause. Everything he said. And at Plethy, we say you're joining a cause. I stole it. It's from John F. Kennedy, who says, I'm going to put a man on the moon when we couldn't reach the ionosphere. And the reason I say that is because, particularly in healthcare, there are good days and bad hours, or they're like bad months. And when it's bad, it's really bad. For example, a large health system would say, we absolutely need it. We have 20,000 patients who need this yesterday. But then coming from Asia, they'll ask me to fill out forms in triplicate. And it'll go for the next 6 months, and they'll come back with one additional question, which you could have asked me 6 months ago, right? And so it's when it's bad, it's really bad. And so what happens is the only way you stay through it is if you believe in the cause. There will be good revenue months and terrible revenue months, but you got to believe in the cause, because that's the only thing that's going to sustain you. And yes, everything that he said about the team and the network that you build out, but you have to believe in the cause. Otherwise, particularly in healthcare, don't do it.
I was just going to add to that. I think believing in the cause is, I couldn't emphasize that more. 100%. It's sometimes it's the only sustaining thing. It's like, aside from your community of people who believe in what you're doing, it's in the end, they believe in what you're doing because you believe in it yourself. And it's sometimes it's the one thing that, okay, you are going through these absolutely terrible times. You feel like, okay, the whole world is crushing you at that point in time. But somehow it's this little fire that says, no, this thing's not going to become extinguished. I will not let this thing go. And that kind of sustains you. And I think that it's an incredibly tough thing. I mean, I think that if anyone plans to become an entrepreneur, my first piece of advice is don't, which is, and I think that once you get past that.
Don't say that. That's a way to be inspiring, Rajeev. Thank you so much.
Inspirational talk of the year.
So what about yourself, Michael? What doesn't get enough attention, do you think, from your perspective?
Innovation, particularly in healthcare.
Say more.
I will. So the challenge, I read somewhere, or maybe I saw a movie, that Jeff Bezos realized early on that the internet was growing at a 2,300% growth rate. And the folks at Barnes & Noble said, so what? I think we have a similar dichotomy right here in the health tech space. Why do we not have universal CPT codes for telehealth or digital and remote diagnostics? Why do you have to individually negotiate a rate of reimbursement with each and every payer there is in the country? There are over 500. Why do people doubt you and think you're going to replace their job? Because we're not. We're trying to refine your job. The focus is giving the care and the attention to the parents and caregivers, period. And that's a change in dichotomy that needs to happen.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Well put. Oh, we did want to leave some time for questions from the audience and kind of get us all involved here. So maybe if anybody has a question, please feel free to raise your hand and we can pass the mic around. Yeah, go ahead.
So my question's to Raja. You discussed about personalizing more than gamifying, right? So how do you personalize at scale while considering cost?
Okay, so you start looking. So if you start beginning to think about personalizing, the first thing you think about is n equals 1, right? This is not for every brown person. That's not how it works. So you fundamentally say, how do I meet Johnny where he is? I don't know whether we're going to go through slides, but I'll just walk you through this. A simple way to think about it is this. First of all, figure out how people like to be coached, cajoled, motivated, kicked, pushed. You and I are different. The second is, how do you feel this morning? It's exactly the same thing as getting up, getting your ass out and going to gym. You wake up and you're like, ain't happening today. Why the heck is that, right? And so if you figure out what that is, then you will know exactly how to. The next one is, what is your support structure? What's the motivation? You will hear people who in the Medicare age say, my motivation is, I want to walk my daughter down the aisle without limping. Or a younger generation will say, I want to show up at the end up at 2 a.m. and still be able to party. That's perfectly fine, as long as you know what it is, right? So if you understand what it is, then you start tailoring it to them. And one of the cool things about it is psycholinguistic works. If you watch The Wolf of Wall Street, what he does is he speaks a certain way, and people are buying penny stocks, right? It's the same thing. If you tell people a certain way, and by the way, you can mimic it with machine learning. And so one of the funny, no, I wouldn't say this. So we have very large enterprise. We have the 5th largest employer in the United States as a client. So their employees' feedback, our NPS is 77, but who cares? But the point is, they will say, I feel heard. I feel my employer cares about me. Are you kidding me? I'm mimicking through psycholinguistic, based on their profile, how to communicate with them. So when you start looking at it in terms of costs, it's not as expensive as you think it is. It's the ability to build these models that Rajeev was talking about on being able to deploy it at scale. N equals 1. We're all different. Does it make sense? Does that answer your question? Yeah. That's really what we did. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Hi, question for Michael and some comments for Raja. I'm curious how your data correlates with where these very young humans fall on the scale, based on typical.
How do we arrive at the risk trajectory?
Well,
Is that the question?
Well, sure. Or if you're determining that a particular infant or whatever the age of the child, where they are on the scale, how does that correlate with conventional methods that don't use your EEG or other types of technology?
Excellent question. Well, first of all, let's back up because I do want to touch on that. The most valuable thing that we have access to is data. The fact that a low-cost, high-volume EEG headset for a baby has not yet existed means a large data set of infant brainwave activity does not exist. We will be the first to cultivate that and use it for various reasons. And I think it goes to a second thing that we haven't talked about, and that are what are the potential challenges of machine learning? Because data integrity is incredibly important because we're trying to use AI for good, and we may have others who are going to be very nefarious and could potentially use that data for something not so good.
And I don't know if you said it, but is there a maximum age for your technology?
Yes. Again, our objective is to start treating a child before they start communicating, and hopefully either get them to understand how to communicate with an autistic point of view, a neurodiverse point of view, or hopefully catch it soon enough and minimize the impact of the autism spectrum to the fact that it doesn't affect their daily life. One other thing I want to point out is we have found that a lot of people who are on the autism spectrum have one tremendous trait or one tremendous skill set, but they're being classified and categorized as different. And that's okay. Different is okay. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just different. I think the new politically correct term is neurodiverse because they're diverse. Their thinking is diverse. So getting them as young as you can before they start speaking and learning how to talk and starting cognitive behavioral therapeutics before 2 years old is going to give them the best chance to have a positive outcome in life long term.
Thank you. For Raja, it's not such a bad concept to have a video game where there's no winners if your consumers keep feeding you quarters. So the other thing too, I don't think there's any shame in saying that, the porn industry has been the technology leader and trendsetter over many, many things over the last 40 years.
Including machine learning, by the way, as well.
Right. It's not just VHS winning over beta. It is the internet itself, it's online video technology, it's online payments, it's VR and AR and a lot. And, that's just the way it is. And you got to remember, there were many, many years. I remember the day that the news came out when somebody said that, quote unquote, legitimate commercial commerce had surpassed porn in revenue. So, it's just a fact and, an interesting one.
Well, they started things like micropayments way ahead of anyone else. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks to all the panel. It was really interesting.
First of all, thank you for the amazing panelists. And when you mentioned branding, there are many initiatives that are happening with companies and startups that are doing AI-based doctor offices that eliminates the human element. So I just wanted to hear any comments that you have.
Can I take that one?
Yeah. I want to jump the gun.
God, that is such a, thank you for that question. Within our company, and we've got some amazing psychologists who help drive our process. And what was first and foremost was the empathy towards the parent. So I joke with friends all the time. They're like, oh, AI, it's going to take over and it's going to start. I'm like, conscious awareness. AI is not aware. Conscious awareness is an energy. We're not trying to replace the human element. We're trying to improve upon the access to care using technology and leveraging technology, not replace the human element. So very good question. But, part of that, if I could piggyback again on how we approach the parents, because this is a very strenuous time. And we're not going to just rubber stamp it. We're going to take the time, and there's a protocol and a process in how we communicate with the parent, certain words we use and certain words we do not use. And we have set up something that's franchisable. Our process is franchisable, it's measurable, and we can evaluate the performance of our clinicians, and we do a postmortem with each and every parent because we want to know how they felt in that examination and improve upon it. So taking the parents' empathy and understanding that they're going through a very challenging thing. If you go to our website, there are no scary images, there are no distressed parents. It may not be a joyous period, but what we're going to do is give that parent the information that they so desperately are seeking, particularly if they're on a wait list and they may know something's wrong with their child, but they can't register them in special ed courses in the fall because they're on a wait list and they can't get in until January 2025. So being empathetic to the parent is paramount.
So I'm going to take that from a business model standpoint. Let's go B2B versus B2B2C. It's kind of one of the questions that you would ask. So the challenge is this. Let's take musculoskeletal care, because you have Hinge Health, Sword Health, Kaya Health, Recovery One, Omada. There are certain conditions where, for certain populations, you could go manage yourself. For example, if you have a sprain or a strain, or you played soccer this weekend and your knee hurt, yes, you can go manage yourself. A solution that says, here's an iPad or a tablet, and watch the videos and follow along, and in 3D it tells you blah, 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 is exceptionally effective. Once you start going beyond that to say, I'm now going to replace a PT or a doctor or a primary care provider and so on, that's when it's not proven yet. Yet is the operative word. 4 or 5 years from now, certainly. Today, yeah, no. Because when you look at the space that we are in, for example, it's a multiple buying center business. So if you're an employee of Meta and you have a sprain and a strain, hey, they're great solutions. You don't need to go see a primary care. You don't need to see an ortho. Use the benefit solution and off it works. But if you have an issue that appears like soccer when you were a kid and meniscus tear, yeah, not so, right? Because you can't drive clinical outcomes. The problem that we have is everyone sounds in their marketing like they can drive clinical outcomes. If that was true, then the Benioff Children's Hospital will start using your damn product, right? Which they don't. And the reason they don't is because it doesn't have clinical efficacy for complex issues. The problem with messaging is it's very hard to bound your message to just that thing. You generalize it. You're like, anything to do with any joint in the body. Yeah, not so, right? And so will we get there? The answer is yes. The next question is, last point is that a bad thing? No, it's not. The reason it's not a bad thing is this. When you start looking across the United States, access to care is a real issue. We live here in San Francisco. If you go across the pond into Oakland, it takes 3.5 weeks to get a PT visit. That's a lot of time. And if you start looking, if you live in Oklahoma or in Minnesota in the peak of winter, you're not driving out, are you? So then, in that case, augmentation with digital health, supported by once in a blue moon clinic visit, becomes that much more important. The second issue is there aren't enough doctors in the marketplace. There aren't enough nurses. There aren't enough PTs. They're bringing in nurses from Philippines. They're giving Indian doctors green card for a period of whatever, H2 visa for a period of time in level 2 trauma centers in small towns and cities in the United States. It's a real issue. We don't have enough of them. So more and more technology coming in, more augmenting, more replacing for simple conditions is a must-have because we are an aging population. Does that resonate? Yeah.
There's another component as well, which comes down to the honesty factor as well. And going back to one of your points, and I think it's very correct. It's okay to be narrow in terms of what you're trying to sell to, because I think that there's a tendency in a lot of organizations, a lot of startups to, of course, you want everyone to use your technology, which unfortunately is, aside from being incorrect and false marketing, it also results in a disappointed customer base. So like marketing has to be highly targeted and to know what your market is, who the physicians are, and so on. So an example is, and this is just pure logic. I mean, from a machine learning and AI perspective, machine learning is extremely hungry for data. It needs tons of data. So if you talk about treating a very marginal disorder, marginal disease, you just don't have the data for that. There's no way you can build an AI model that'll ever solve that. The second thing is, if you look at what doctors, and my ex-wife was a radiologist, so I kind of have some insight into this. She can basically diagnose very specific things that somebody's got like an embolism in their lung, or they have a broken bone or something like that, or a lymphoma. But the thing is, an AI can only identify certain components of that. It's the holistic component of that. And unfortunately, one of the aspects of American medicine is that it's kind of geared doctors to becoming hyper specialists in certain areas and ignoring the holistic concept of that. So I think that when we talk about marketing, it's good to be very precise, because I think that there is a very strong market there for taking care of the small elements, like building an AI model that can detect embolisms or detect COVID. So we had built a model that can identify COVID really well, or can solve certain types of problems. But when you think about the real big problems in society, they're the more holistic components, and you need humans to solve that. And I think that one of the challenges of marketing is to kind of realize that it's okay to sell small, it's okay to sell narrow, because that's where a lot of the problems are, and that's where the biggest impact can be made. The holistic components of that, doctors love it if you can basically take care of the embolism problem, because then they can look at the patient history and understand, okay, this is part of a broader set of challenges, and this is something that, in my opinion, you can wait 20 years for that, and AI is not going to solve that problem.
So, Rajeev, I did have a question about, if we think of specialists, doctors working in conjunction, and there's one general practitioner, maybe like a quarterback, that's kind of coalescing all this data. Can models function in the same capacity, where you've got these refined models that are working in conjunction to achieve artificial general intelligence? Would that work, theoretically?
That's a very, very good question. The short answer is maybe. The more complicated answer is that machines are terrible at two things: context. Machines do not understand context, and thus they do not have common sense. And then the second thing is that machines are far from creative. So the company that Luminas Health that that I'm affiliated with, the AI for that is good. It's really great. It's very targeted. It can deliver exactly the right kind of the medical coding that you need for a specific patient record. But it is that. And the question is, can you combine that with other things to make it smarter and make it broader and, for example, solve a broader billing problem? The answer is yes, but a lot of times what's missing is the context, which means that you probably will have to have a human that's driving that conversation. So you might have the general intelligence that can kind of pick up that can help you with parts of that problem, but you need a human to guide that. This is maybe a little less pacifist, but one of the things that my other company is involved with. We're starting to do some work with the military. And so one of the challenges with the military is that you have very targeted systems. So you have systems that are focused on a very specific type of problem. But at the end of the day, it's the human who comes up with a strategy. It's the human who figures out what is the correct deployment pattern. It's the human who figures out, okay, well, these are the targets you want to pick out. And I hope that we never get to the point where we leave that up to a machine, because it's not really something where I see that that's a benefit. So in terms of, I think that because of the fact that machines lack context, machines lack innovation, machines lack common sense, I don't see this as a problem that will be solved tomorrow. I don't see it a problem that will be solved 50 years from now. We are just barely scratching the surface. And if people, for example, would look under the hood for large language models, I like to say that it's an elaborate parrot. It's essentially, it's learned an enormous corpus of data, like it's got billions of parameters. But fundamentally what it does is it understands that if I ask a specific question, if I prompt it, then these are the likely answers. It understands that I'll provide this answer because it's seen billions of records, and it understands that if I pose a question in this way, then this is the answer. It doesn't understand the answer. It doesn't understand what it's saying. And for me, it's surprising that it comes back with the right answers, which is kind of frightening, which tells me that maybe half the people I talk to maybe are the same way. But it's basic. Well, the fact that a lot of essays are written that way, like kids kind of writing essays for their school. But it's one of these things that it doesn't understand what it's saying. It doesn't understand what it's producing. It doesn't have any common sense. So I can get it to give me two contradictory answers in the same chat. And the reason for that is it doesn't really understand what it's talking about. And so therefore, an artificial general intelligence, for all of the grand innovations that we've done so far, we are, I would say, at least 50 to 100 years away from that.
Okay.
Can I give a contrary? Yeah. I'm not going to debate with you, but I grew up under the Moore's law. Yeah. That's the problem, right? So I believe for certain areas to create these neural pathways, we'll get there in 5 years. Let me tell you why. In the early 90s, my college dorm mate got a job at Walmart, and his job in Bentonville was to decide what product goes to next to what product at Walmart. This is buy a toothpaste, there's a toothbrush right next to it thingy, right? And so that's really all he did. And so early days of neural net, right, as you can imagine. Weighted capacitors and all those nonsense. What I do believe is there are certain tasks which are not necessarily highly intelligent, but repetitive or automation level tasks that I see in the next 5 years kind of going away.
Yeah.
Where there is higher level of intelligence and decision making that's required, that's the oversight which is going to take on the artificial general intelligence for a long time. Because I go into these conferences where claims adjusters for large insurance companies keep asking the same question. Will my job go away? Right? And I've now heard it for about a year and a half in every conference. And the answer is no, but it's going to get easier. I will say why. Because some of the mundane, stupid stuff that you guys do every day is going to be automated. Does Johnny require 6 more PT sessions? Yes, because he hasn't reached 120-degree active flexion on his knee. Thank you, Einstein, right? But then the next question is, does it then determine whether you have cancer and anything else like that? So that contextual, I'm not sure. I don't have a date for it, but all these other stuff, I see that going away in 5 years.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So I think that what a lot of the, for example, medical efficiency, like back office efficiency is a massive domain. Today, it's a $250 billion problem. And it is, and a large part of this is repetitive. And so medical coding is a great example. And medical coders today, they can earn $50,000, $60,000. They're highly trained. and it takes. They do it wrong. The error rate is extremely high. $29 billion lost every year from. Sometimes, yeah, exactly. There's sometimes intentional fraud going on there, and so as a result of that, medical coding is one area where, firstly, you can put honesty into the process, consistency, speed, and so on. So it's an area where it's a highly repetitive activity. It's something where, I hate to say it, but it will replace people. That's an activity that will do that.
Well, Raja, Stephen, Michael, Rajeev, we're so excited to have learned from you guys and had a couple laughs. Very grateful to Adventary and TriNet and WeWork and Vistra as well. Also to Nicodex for web and mobile programming and new product development, and Primero Negocios for your growth engine. We, as a Zombies community, always want to be valuable to the speakers. So let's take 30 seconds each on who's your ideal target customer, or how can we be valuable to you? By the way, this is going to 50 plus countries. So how can we be valuable to each of you?
So we have two markets. One is healthcare, the other is workers' comp, where we sell to self-insured and carriers. Two areas where you can be of help to me. One is introductions into people who believe in helping people recover. And the second is we have just started a Series A raise. We are post-revenue, a year from breaking even.
First, I want to thank everybody for coming, and for the folks who put this together, Stephen, Adventary, our partners there. This is very valuable because it gives us a voice and gives us an opportunity to share what we're doing with a unique group of people who could potentially be very, very helpful. From our perspective at ASD.me, we've built the engine. We literally have built the engine. We hired 14 PhD psychologists in 2023. We got credentialed to accept insurance with the top 5 payers in 3 states, which gave us about 83% coverage for the insured population in those states. And when we ran our media, the demand was so significant that we elected to stop. We didn't want to be part of the same problem having parents on a wait list. We're like, let's go have a significant raise of capital so we can hire these qualified elite PhD physicians and meet that demand and capture that revenue. We're raising money and we will dominate this category. The question is who's coming with us, and we're asking those who are interested, give us a call.
Beautiful.
Firstly, I want to thank Stephen. So we are very happy to be part of the Adventary family, and I think that we're very excited to be part of it. From our side, one of the biggest things that we're looking for right now is it is a joint venture, but we need about $1 million to kind of take it into production. Sorry, I shouldn't quote a real number, but we need about that. So that's basically what we need to kind of get to is. So I think where you guys can definitely help is in fundraising. And the good thing is that our initial set of customers are already there. We know who they are, but down at some point in the future, we're firstly going to expand. And secondly, I think there's going to be some broader market opportunities because of the fact that we're collecting this enormous corpus of data, and we're getting a machine to write and speak like doctors and can be prompted as a doctor. So you can kind of give it medical prompts, and it will actually come back with kind of medical answers. Which kind of is my ex-wife would be really skeptical about that, but it's something that is down the line. So we would love to kind of maybe have some discussions about how we could maybe think about that solution. It's down the line. It's not something tomorrow, but something we are definitely thinking about.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. And also, Hassan just reminded me June 25th is going to be the next Zombie Show. So we'd love to have you there, and Buzzable will reach out. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thank you, guys. And enjoy the rest of the evening. Big shout out for up top. Way to go, guys. And thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the night. All right.